Simple to make and fantastic looking oak shelves on a budget. I'm going to see if I can make these things within half an hour for a very small amount of money. I'll be showing you where you can get the materials, I'll show you how to build them, and then I'm going to show you how to put them on the wall. And then at the end of it all, we're going to test and see how much weight they can hold. So I've managed to source a couple of these quality oak shelves from Wickes for £20. These are 900mm long and they're going to give us the perfect high quality look on the wall. But how do we turn these into a floating shelf? Well, I found a little something on Amazon that you guys are going to want to see. These are little floating shelf brackets. I like these because they're slimline. They're going to give us that floating shelf look that we're going for, and a pack of these were really cheap as well, and it's going to bring us in within a nice tight budget. So as with all the materials and tools that I'm going to use today, I'll put a link down below where you can grab some of these. Right, so now what we need to do is figure out how we're going to attach these to our shelf. I've got 4 of these brackets in the pack and I'm going to put 2 on each shelf. Lay your brackets just on the shelf, anywhere for now. You'll need a combination square like this one and set the square to 200mm. And because it's set to 200mm, I can just make a small mark at the end of my square. Do that on both ends of the shelf. Now set your square to 60mm, and on that 200mm mark I can just put a line where my bracket needs to go. Now centre your bracket on the line we just made and then put a couple of little crosses right in the centre of the holes in the bracket. So we've now got 2 crosses where we're going to drill into the oak. So I've done that for both of my brackets. Now this process is hugely about attention to detail. So when we're drilling this oak, because we're only going to get one go at this, attention to detail and making sure your measurements are correct is absolutely key. Now with these little shelves, you received one of these screw packs, and within that screw pack you got a bunch of these 15mm long screws, and these are the ones that attach the oak shelf to the bracket. So grab a nice sharp 2.5mm drill bit. Use any combi drill for this. Set it to a slow speed. I've got it set to number 1, and then we're going to drill on those marks we made. But we need to make sure we don't drill too deep and end up going through the oak shelf. So I'll put a bit of tape around my drill bit, and that will tell us when we get to the correct depth, and that way we're not going to end up over penetrating all the way through the oak and end up coming out the top of the shelf, because that would look terrible. Place the drill bit on the marks that we made, keep the drill nice and straight, and remember to stop when you get to the piece of tape. Repeat that for all the marks that we made. So now I can attach my brackets. I've got a PH2 screwdriver bit. These are cheap screws made in China, and if we use the wrong screwdriver bit, the likelihood is we'll strip the screws. Now you can just screw the bracket to the shelf. Now we'll move on to fixing these onto the wall, because with this type of bracket it's important that we get a good fixing into the wall to give us that floating shelf type of effect, but remaining strong enough to hold not only an oak shelf like this, but some weight on the shelf as well. Before I fix these shelves to the wall, if you're not subscribed already, hit subscribe for me, because you don't want to miss out on all the videos I've got to come, and like the video if it's helping you out so that it reaches and helps more people on YouTube. Now of course we can't just screw our shelf brackets to the wall. Because it's a floating shelf bracket, the screw holes are concealed behind the shelf. So I'll now take the brackets back off the shelf so that I can work with the brackets without the shelf in the way. Now decide on a location and height for your shelves and make a small centre mark where these shelves are going to go. Now at this point a laser level would come in very useful, but I'm not going to use this because remember, we're trying to do this job on a budget, and I appreciate not all of you are going to own one of these. So a traditional level it is. So we need to figure out the easiest way to work out where the centre of our brackets need to go so that they line up with the holes. The easiest way to do this is to draw a line on the wall that's going to be covered up by the back of the shelf anyway, so you're never going to see it. In the middle of that line, make a centre mark for the centre of your shelf. From that centre point, make a little mark with a pencil 250mm either side of the centre point. You can position the centre hole of your bracket on that mark and then mark the other 2 holes. Make sure you get it level. I'll just repeat that for the other side, and what we have now is all of the marks for the holes in our bracket. But before we go drilling these holes, we should take a look at the fixings that you got, because they're cheap Chinese built fixings that are very, very weak, and if we go using those in this solid wall, the screws are just going to snap and they're not very good. So I like to use these Fisher Duo Powers. These are the extra long ones. They're 65 millimeters long by 8 millimeters. They're absolutely perfect for fixing the shelves onto a solid wall. So these are what we're going to use, and I'll show you how to put those in a second. If you're not fixing to a solid wall, do look at plasterboard or dot and dab alternatives, because you won't be able to use a solid wall fixing like this. But in our situation, these are the ones to use. I've hung lots of shelves with these before, and they give us a really solid fixing. So an 8mm drill bit in an SDS drill, that's what you're going to want for a solid wall. And you can see I've got a bit of tape on there to stop over penetration, just like we did with a shelf. We need to make sure that we don't go too deep, so we can stop when we get to that piece of tape. And now I'm just going to use one of these multi-detectors just to check that there's no cables in the wall where I'm going to be drilling. Now when we drill into this wall, it's going to be really messy, because this is a cinder block wall, so it's going to have horrible grey dust that's going to come out here, and it's going to go over the nice painted wall and skirting board. So my little tip is grab an envelope, put that underneath where you're going to be drilling, and we're going to tape that to the wall, and that's going to help to cut down on the amount of mess as we drill these holes. Place the drill bit on the marks, keep the drill nice and level, and let's drill these holes. Now you just want a little hammer and 3 of the Duo Powers. Now you want some good quality 60mm screws to replace the ones that you got with the brackets. And now the plugs are in, we can screw the brackets to the wall. You can see I used my drill, but I like to finish these by hand with a screwdriver so that I can feel how tight the screws are, and that way I know that those plugs have got really good contact. Check each bracket's level as you go. And I've repeated that for the other bracket for this shelf. And now you'll see why that attention to detail and accuracy was so important. Because we've pre-drilled these holes, we should be able to just lift the shelf in place and quite simply put our screws back in the holes that we drilled earlier. And everything should line up absolutely perfectly. And that is why the attention to detail really matters when you're creating these shelves. But we're not quite done yet. We need to add another shelf above this one. Now I'd recommend a 250mm gap above this bottom shelf. If you make the shelves too close, it won't work, because you won't be able to get anything on them. So I measure up 250mm, I make a little mark with a pencil, and then I draw a line using my level, just like we did with the first shelf. I'm using my level again just to transfer that centre mark from our bottom line up to the top line, and then I can measure 250mm each side of that centre mark, just like we did before. Now we can fix the brackets for the top shelf using the same techniques that we just learned on the bottom shelf. And now for the final time we can refit both of these shelves. And then what I think we'll do is put a little bit of weight on them so that you can see how strong they are. It's a little bit deceiving because they don't look very strong, but they hold a lot more than you think. Guys, let me know in the comments what other everyday tasks around the house, like fitting these shelves, do you guys want to see on the channel? So they're up, but how much weight are they going to hold? Because they don't look that strong, do they? Being kind of that floating design, I want to know, are they actually up to the job? And I'm sure that's probably what you guys want to know as well. So I haven't pre-tested these. I really hope they don't fall off the wall. This is a full toolbox. You can hear it probably weighs about 10-15 kilos. Let's see if it can hold it. Let's get the SDS drill on there as well. There you go. There's a lot of weight on this shelf and it's going nowhere. Solid oak, floating shelves on a budget and really quick to make as well. Give it a go yourselves and I'll see you guys in the next one.